Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
Today, we are turning our analytical lens onto a collection of essays that really serves as a master class in spotting institutional mechanics. We're looking at And Yet by Christopher Hitchens.
Right, and just to be clear right out of the gate, for everyone listening, this is not a book review. We aren't here to, critique his prose style or debate his atheism or relitigate his politics.
Okay.
We are doing something completely different today in this deep dive.
Yeah, we're treating this book essentially as a data set. Hitchens was this incredibly prolific, almost pathological observer of the intelligentsia, the media ecosystem, the whole political commentary apparatus. So what we're doing today is taking his observations and using them to map the machinery of what we might call intellectual manufacturing consent.
And I love that framing, because when you read these pieces, you realize he wasn't just writing about specific people, right? Like Hillary Clinton or Arthur Schlesinger or Che Guevara.
No, not at all.
He was writing about how a system processes truth and turns into narrative. He's showing us the actual gears of the machine.
And that is the absolute mission of our deep dive today. We're going to analyze how ideas are commodified, how proximity to power structurally distorts the historical record, and really how institutional logic just overrides individual perception.
We're mapping the factory floor where history gets manufactured.
Yes.
So let's start with the design of this machine, phase one, because I think we often assume historians and journalists are these independent seekers of truth, right?
That's the mythology.
They're out there in the trenches, digging up facts, holding power to account. But the data set paints a very different picture of the primary system of this whole political and literary class.
It does. It identifies the primary function of this class not as truth-seeking at all, but as legitimacy-producing.
Yes.
And the central figure in this design, the archetype, is what is called the courtier.
The courtier, it sounds very medieval, like someone whispering in the king's ear while checking their own reflection in the mirror to make sure their wig is straight.
It is entirely structural in that medieval sense. It refers to an intellectual whose primary functional ambition is access.
Access to power.
Exactly. And the perfect case study provided here is Arthur Schlesinger Jr. Now, for those who might not know, Schlesinger was the preeminent historian of the Kennedy era.
The house historian for Camelot.
Right, the intellectual architect of that entire mystique. But when you compare Schlesinger's private journals, his daily diaries, with his published histories, you find this fascinating, almost forensic discrepancy.
And this is the part that really grabbed me, because usually, we assume the history book is the final word. We think, well, he was there, he wrote the book, that must be what happened.
Right.
But there's a specific moment where the courtier mask slips, and you see the machinery operating underneath.
It's the smoking gun of the entire courtier system. So picture this scene. It's Schlesinger and President Kennedy, and they're flying to Amherst on Air Force One. They're chatting about former President Eisenhower's memoirs.
Okay.
And Kennedy's complaining about how self-righteous Eisenhower sounds in them, saying something like, apparently he never did anything wrong.
Which is pretty rich coming from a politician. How dare he present himself in a good light?
Indeed. But then Kennedy says something incredibly revealing. He tells Schlesinger, when we come to writing the memoirs of this administration, we'll do it differently.
That one word implies the historian and the president are on the exact same team. That's not an independent observer, that's a co-author.
Exactly. And the analysis points out that Schlesinger didn't just record this instruction, he enacted it. When he wrote 1,000 Days, which is basically the definitive history of the Kennedy administration, he produced this incredibly smooth, mythic narrative.
He smoothed over all the chaos.
Right. But if you look at Schlesinger's daily journals from that exact same period, the raw data, essentially it is full of panic, improvisation, and just total mess.
But hold on, isn't that just editing? Every historian has to synthesize facts eventually. Is it really systemic rot to just make a narrative readable for the public?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? The argument here is that it crosses the line when readability turns into apologia. Look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the private journals, the administration is hectically improvising. They're ill-served by intelligence. They feel completely outpointed by Khrushchev. It is terrifyingly real. It's just humans making it up as they go along to avoid nuclear war.
But in the official history...
In the official history, Schlesinger writes about their toughness and restraint and how it was matchlessly calibrated.
Wow. Okay, so he literally turned the messy reality of governance into the Camelot myth. It's not summarizing, it's retroactively fixing the mistakes for the historical record.
He prioritized access over objective truth, and that is the fundamental design feature of the courtier. The structural flaw here is retrospective synthesis.
Meaning?
The system encourages the official history to obscure the improvisation of governance. Because if the public understood how messy and approximate statecraft actually is, the legitimacy of the entire institution would be threatened.
It's like Instagram versus reality, but for the nuclear age. You literally cannot let the public know that the guys with the nuclear codes are just winging it.
A very apt analogy. The courtier historian basically ensures the filter is always applied. They function as the post-production team for the state.
But it's not just the historians who do this, right?
Yeah.
This design feature extends to the media class as well. There's this critique of the media's absolute obsession with civility.
Oh, yes.
Using this concept from a Czech novel, the good soldiers schweik the party for moderate progress.
The party for moderate progress within the boundaries of law. It's a brilliant satirical concept. And it's used to argue that the modern media ecosystem essentially functions to flatten genuine ideological difference into manageable gray areas.
You see this all the time today. The media absolutely hates mudslinging. They hate polarization. If you're a politician and you attack your opponent's core philosophy too hard, you're immediately labeled divisive.
Right, but the structural question is, why is divisive an insult in politics? Politics is division. It is literally the clash of opposing worldviews.
Like the fundamental disagreements between Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine.
Exactly. Those are mutually exclusive views on how human beings should live, tradition versus revolution. But the media system has an incentive structure that values civility over clarity.
Because if everyone is civil and bipartisan, it maintains the institutional status quo.
Precisely. It treats polarization as a malfunction of the system, rather than a reflection of genuine worldview differences. When parties actually agree on the big structural things, like foreign intervention or the underlying economic model, they end up fighting viciously over personality quirks.
To mask the lack of real choice, I think the phrase used is the narcissism of the small difference.
Right. If the system doesn't allow for a genuine structural debate between, say, a strict socialist and a pure libertarian, or an isolationist and an interventionist, then you end up with a debate about who is more likable or who has a better personal story.
It's a distraction technique. Look over here at this gaffe or this tweet so you don't notice we all agree on the military budget.
Exactly. The system is designed to narrow the bandwidth of acceptable thought. So we have this design that rewards courtiers who polish history and a media class that polices the boundaries of debate to keep everything moderate.
Which flows perfectly into phase 2, the incentives. Because this system doesn't just shape politics, it commodifies everything. It turns ideas into products. Even the things that are supposed to be against the system get sucked right in.
The commodification of radicalism.
Yes, the fascinating case study of Che Guevara.
The T-shirt guy.
The T-shirt guy. I mean, walk into any college dorm in the last 40 years, and you'll see that face on a wall. I'm pretty sure I bought a Che poster in college. I didn't know anything about his actual economics. I just thought it looked rebellious.
And that is the incentive architecture of the system actively at work. There is this incredible, almost painful irony in Che's legacy.
Right, with the banknotes.
Yes. When Che Guevara took over the National Bank of Cuba after the revolution, he obviously had to sign the banknotes. And he did it with this contemptuous flourish. He just signed them Che.
Like, money is garbage, I don't care about this institution.
Exactly. It was a gesture of total contempt for the cash nexus. He genuinely wanted to move society completely beyond money. And yet, look at the structural outcome. Che Guevara is now perhaps the most commodified revolutionary symbol in human history.
But the data set goes deeper than just the T-shirts, right? It looks at the actual currency system in Cuba.
This is where the systems analysis gets truly brutal. At the time of this observation, Cuba effectively had 4 parallel currencies.
Okay, break those down.
There was a U.S. dollar, which basically ran the real economy. There was the Intua money specifically for tourists. There was the convertible peso. And then there was the humble, everyday Cuban peso.
And guess whose face is on the worthless Cuban peso?
Che. The image of the man who fundamentally hated money appears on the currency that has virtually no value, while the system itself actually runs on the U.S. dollar.
The ultimate symbol of the empire he fought and died trying to destroy.
It is a brutal feedback loop.
It's like the system is mocking him.
Well, it's how the system neutralizes radicalism structurally. It strips the context to sell the iconography. It turns the threat into a boutique symbol. Ideology just becomes aesthetics.
You can wear the t-shirt, you can buy the poster, but the actual political content has been completely extracted.
The system rewards the image of rebellion while seamlessly maintaining the structure of capitalism. It's an incredible defense mechanism.
Speaking of images and rewards, there's another incredible breakdown of incentive architecture here, the Hillary Clinton myth. And specifically, this really weird story about her name.
Yes, the Edmund Hillary claim.
It felt like such a petty detail at first, obsessing over a name, but when you zoom out, it explains so much about how elite adaptation operates.
It's micro-history revealing macro structure. This is the absolute perfect example of the systemic incentive to lie, or rather, the incentive to craft a perfect narrative.
So for years, Hillary Clinton claimed she was named after Sir Edmund Hillary, the man who conquered Mount Everest.
Which sounds like a fantastic story.
It's totally cinematic. I was named after an explorer, destined for greatness from birth. It gives you a sense of historical gravity.
It fits the archetype perfectly.
Yeah.
The political market loves that. The problem is, and this is a matter of basic public record, Hillary Clinton was born in 1947.
Right.
Sir Edmund Hillary didn't climb Everest until 1953. He was an obscure beekeeper in New Zealand when she was born.
So it is chronologically impossible. It's not a difference of opinion, it's just physically, demonstrably false.
Completely false.
Yeah.
But here is where we have to apply systems analysis.
Yeah.
Why did that lie survive for so many years without being challenged?
Because the political market rewards the charming story over the factual biography.
Exactly. The media system prefers a narrative that fits the striving greatness archetype over doing basic chronological fact-checking. It's the courtier dynamic again.
The press didn't want to check the date because the story was too useful for the narrative being built.
Right.
But what happened when they finally got caught? Because eventually, someone looks at a calendar.
That is where you see the structural reward for elite adaptation. When a spokesperson finally admitted it wasn't true, they spun it instantly as sweet family lore.
Sweet family lore.
The system allows the elite to dismiss deception as lore. The myth had already served its purpose. It helped build a reputation. It added gravity to her persona for years.
And once that reputational capital was accumulated, the fact that the underlying asset was fraudulent didn't even matter. The system had already processed it and paid out the dividends.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Reputational capital is accumulated through myth-making, and the penalties for factual inaccuracy are completely negligible compared to the massive rewards for a compelling narrative.
It's like the system allows you to take out a massive loan on a lie, invest it in your career, and then when you finally have to pay it back, you just say, oops, my mistake, but you get to keep all the profit.
The incentive structure actually encourages this kind of fabrication because the upside is so high and the downside is so carefully managed by the surrounding institutions.
Okay, so we have a system designed to produce consensus, incentivized to commodify dissent, and set up to reward myth-making. Let's move to phase 3, the outcomes.
Yes.
What happens to our ability to analytically process reality when we live in this kind of funhouse?
One of the most damaging outcomes is analytical distortion. And a prime example of this is the controversy over George Orwell's so-called list.
Right. The Orwell was a snitch narrative. I remember seeing this pop up online a few years ago. It seems to cycle back into the discourse every few years.
It does cycle through, almost like a systemic immune response.
Yeah.
So in the late 90s, it was revealed, and I use that word skeptically, that George Orwell had provided a list of names to the Information Research Department, a branch of the British Foreign Office.
What was the list exactly?
He identified people he believed were Stalinist fellow travelers who structurally shouldn't be trusted with anti-totalitarian propaganda work.
And the intelligentsia just lost their minds over this.
Oh, completely.
They call him a McCarthyite, a snitch, a total traitor to the left.
And this reaction perfectly demonstrates the system's structural blindness. The media class focused entirely on the manners of the list.
The manners.
Yes. Was it polite to name names? Was it gentlemanly? They completely ignored the substance of what Orwell was actually pointing out.
Which was that these people were actively supporting a totalitarian state that was systematically murdering millions of people.
Exactly. The system protects its own conformity. Orwell had identified intellectuals who were fundamentally willing to adapt to absolute power. There's a parallel drawn here to Vichy France.
Right. Orwell and his friend Richard Rees used to play this parlor game.
Yes. They would sit around and guess which prominent public figures in Britain would sell out and collaborate if the Germans successfully invaded.
That is a deeply dark game. Who would be the Vichy mayor of London?
It's dark, but it is a necessary game for critical thinking. Orwell understood that intellectuals have a very specific structural weakness for power. They deeply want to be close to the winning side, whatever it is.
So the outcome of the snitch controversy was that the system successfully reframed defending democracy against Stalinism as being mean to your professional colleagues.
Exactly. It prioritized the social cohesion of the literary cocktail party over the moral reality of the Gulag.
That is genuinely chilling when you frame it that way.
But that is the distortion outcome in a nutshell. The system creates an environment where anti-communism becomes a primary status marker.
If you were too fiercely anti-communist, you were gauche, you were uncivil, you were mudslinging.
Right. The system actively distorts the perception of actual totalitarian threats, because recognizing those threats would require breaking the social codes of the elite class.
And speaking of threats in reality, there's this fascinating analytical take on James Bond.
Yes.
I mean, I never thought I'd see 007 in a structural systems analysis, but it fits the outcomes theme perfectly.
Oh, it's a profound look at the fiction-creating reality feedback loop. It analyzes Ian Fleming's work and points out that structural concepts like the license to kill and the dirty bomb entered the public imagination through fiction long before they were fully realized in intelligence doctrine.
So Ian Fleming didn't just write spy novels. He essentially wrote the script for the future deep state.
In a way, yes. Cultural output structurally prepares the citizenry for state expansion. The whole 007 mythos actively glamorizes the lack of democratic oversight.
It makes the extra-legal actions of the state seem sophisticated, cool, and ultimately necessary. We accept the license to kill because we've seen the movie.
We know the good guy needs to break the rules to save the world.
Right.
It conditions the public to accept a security state that operates completely outside the law. It is a form of soft consent manufacturing.
It's incredible.
Take the dirty bomb anxiety. It's noted as a toilet train bomb phrase. Yeah. But it becomes a massive policy driver in reality, primarily because it was first established as a compelling plot device. The fiction creates the categorical container that reality then fills.
Okay, so fiction shapes policy. But what happens when that policy then shapes our view of the entire world? This brings us to phase 4, persistence.
The persistence of the system.
Right. Why does the system keep going? Why don't we, as a society, just see through it when it fails?
It's because of a deep systemic solipsism. Western institutions have this overwhelming tendency to project their own structural logic onto illiberal actors. They literally refuse to believe what they are seeing.
They assume everyone is just like them underneath it all.
Exactly.
There is that absolutely devastating line about Iran in the material.
Engaging with Iran is like having sex with someone who hates you.
Oof. That is visceral.
It is shocking, but analytically it refers to the absolute refusal of Western diplomats to believe the plain stated speech of the Iranian regime.
Because the diplomatic institution entirely relies on the foundational premise of negotiation.
Right. The assumption that everyone is fundamentally a rational actor who wants a deal, who wants global trade, who wants openness. So when they encounter a regime that is explicitly theocratic and apocalyptic, the system literally cannot perceive it.
It persists in seeking a moderate faction that doesn't actually exist because the system's own survival requires it to exist.
It is a massive mirroring error. We look at them and we just see ourselves in the mirror. We see the exact same dynamic with Turkey.
Yes, the constant obsession with Turkey as the bridge between East and West.
Referencing Orhan Pamuk's novel Snow, the analysis shows how Western media absolutely loves the bridge metaphor because it's incredibly comforting. It suggests structural connection, smooth transition, moderation.
But the reality on the ground was a severe authoritarian drift.
Exactly. The system loves its own metaphor so much that it completely ignored the reality of Erdogan's power consolidation. We see the bridge, but we completely miss the prison being built on it.
We miss the fact that bridges can be blown up or closed or used to march armies across.
And then look at how the system processes Hezbollah.
Described here as a state within a state.
This is a total failure of categorization. Western perception generally categorizes groups into binary boxes. They're either terrorists, guys with guns hiding in caves, or they're political actors, guys in suits speaking at the UN.
But Hezbollah is both and neither.
Right. They use massive soft power rebuilding slums, running entire school systems, providing health care, and they use hard power systematic assassinations and military force.
They function as a complete parallel institutional system.
But our systemic perception fails entirely because we don't have a pre-existing cognitive box for a competent, totalitarian social service provider.
We try to jam them into our existing boxes, and when they don't fit, we just systematically ignore the parts that stick out. It really seems like ignoring the parts that don't fit is the running theme of this entire persistence phase.
And it's vital to understand that this blindness isn't just a modern bureaucratic problem. The dataset goes back to G.K. Chesterton to show how ideological dogma acts as a permanent institutional filter.
No, Chesterton is usually beloved by conservatives for his wit and his writing, but he gets really taken apart analytically here.
Completely dismantled. The analysis fully acknowledges Chesterton's brilliance, his incredible wit, his way with words, but it meticulously shows how his Catholic dogma acted as a severe blinder.
Because he couldn't perceive the threat of Nazism accurately. Which seems crazy because Nazism seems pretty easy to spot as a bad thing.
You would think. But he viewed the entire world exclusively through a theological lens. So he blamed the rise of Nazism on Prussianism and Protestantism.
He thought because Hitler was bad, he must be a heretic in the Protestant sense.
Exactly. He structurally couldn't see the Catholic roots of Austrian anti-Semitism.
He was so obsessed with his own internal system. Catholicism is inherently good, Protestantism is inherently bad, that he literally couldn't see the monster standing right in front of him.
That is the ultimate persistence mechanism. When an intellectual permanently binds themselves to a total system, whether that's the church, the party, or the modern bipartisan consensus, they lose the ability to perceive paradoxical truths.
They cannot see the yellow star looming because they are entirely focused on their own sectarian grievances.
Precisely. And that fundamentally explains why these ideological systems persist, even when they continuously fail to explain reality. To the adherent, the internal coherence of the system is vastly more important than the actual evidence of the outside world.
Which leads us right into phase 5, interconnection. We've talked about the media, about historical records, about foreign policy and dogma. But how do the state and the broader culture lock this all together? It's not just isolated domains, it's a massive feedback loop.
It is entirely interconnected. The analysis points directly to the feedback loop between the expansion of state power and the eager compliance of the media ecosystem.
Looking specifically at the erosion of the Fourth Amendment, warrantless wiretapping.
Yes, the power suits piece. It analyzes how the state of war justification, specifically the emergency of 9/11, was actively utilized to justify permanent, sprawling institutional expansion.
Citing the Lincoln precedent.
Right.
Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War.
Exactly. The modern state uses historical anomalies to justify permanent structural changes in governance. But the critical interconnected mechanism here is the media's role in that expansion.
Yeah, don't push back.
The analysis argues that the media often acts merely as a stenographer for the security state. They constantly quote anonymous intelligence officials as if they're completely neutral, objective sources of truth.
Instead of acting as a check on that power, they just amplify the state's justification for it.
And this intense demand for structural conformity isn't strictly political, it bleeds right into the culture. There's this hilarious but deeply biting analysis of Christmas.
The collectivization of gaiety. I love that phrase so much. It sounds incredibly Soviet.
It's the one-party state of culture. The argument is that the immense societal pressure to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, this demand that absolutely everyone must be happy and unified at the exact same time, directly mirrors the political demand for bipartisanship.
It's mandatory unity. You will have fun, and you will agree.
It is a demand for societal unity at the complete expense of individual authenticity. And there's a brilliant Tocquevillian analysis applied here.
About the voluntary principle.
Yes, the voluntary principle of religion is violated. When the state or the culture mandates observance, it inherently corrupts both the state and the religion. Just as when the media mandates civility, it inherently corrupts the politics.
It all connects perfectly. The demand for a smooth, unbroken narrative in history with Schlesinger.
Yes.
The demand for a moderate middle in politics with the Party of Moderate Progress. And the demand for mandatory joy at Christmas.
It is all about suppressing the messy, contradictory individual reality in favor of a cohesive, centrally managed system.
It's the absolute fear of dissonance. The system simply cannot handle the individual who stands outside the consensus. Whether that's Orwell holding his list of names, or Hitchens refusing to participate in forced holiday cheer, or the voter who completely rejects the two-party binary.
That is the exact mechanism of control.
So bringing this all together, the courtier historians, the commodified revolutionaries, the solipsistic diplomats, what is the crisis in perception here?
The structural crisis is that we inherently perceive the outputs of this system as information when they're actually institutional maintenance.
Unpack that?
We look at a history book written by Schlesinger, or a primetime news report about Iran, or a mass-produced T-shirt of Che Guevara, and we genuinely think we are seeing independent observations of reality. We think we are seeing the world as it is.
But we aren't.
We are seeing a highly curated output, deliberately designed to produce legitimacy for the existing power structure.
If you read Schlesinger strictly as a historian, you completely miss him as a courtier. If you see Che as just a cool symbol of rebellion, you miss the authoritarian reality of his actions. If you see bipartisanship as an inherent virtue, you totally miss the suppression of genuine democratic choice.
The surface interpretation completely fails because it accepts the system's own internal logic as truth. The obscured layer is that these institutions are legitimacy-producing engines.
And the system actively filters out dissonance. It calls Orwell a snitch so we don't look at the gulags. It calls polarization uncivil so we don't demand real structural alternatives.
And it amplifies comfort. It constantly pushes the bridge metaphor for Turkey or the moderate progress narrative to keep us docile. The crisis in perception is that we are navigating the real world using a map drawn by people whose primary systemic incentive is to hide the cliff edges from us.
And systems-level analysis, what we are doing here with this dataset, is fundamentally about putting down that curated map and actually looking at the ground you're standing on.
It changes the entire visibility of the world. You stop asking, is this specific story true? And you start asking, what structural purpose does this narrative serve?
Who is actively rewarded by this version of history?
Exactly. What reality is being smoothly paved over to maintain the consensus? That is the analytical tool this dataset provides.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.